2024 was my best trail finning year yet, there's no doubt about that. However, out of all the months of the year, one has to rise above the others in terms of what I caught that month. This year, December was that month. It's almost unbelievable how much great action I got in this month, and we've got a lot to go over, so let's get right into the video. We start things off strong right at the beginning of the month on Sunday, December 1st, when I woke up to word that a BNSF empty grain train was heading east from Texas with a KCSM Grey Ghost leader and a BNSF fake bonnet trailing. Since I had still yet to see a moving Grey Ghost AC-44 leader, I decided to not pass up this opportunity and patiently waited all day for it to approach. After dinner, I got a text from a friend that it had left Wellington and was en route to Wichita. Unfortunately, it was after dark, so the only usable piece of camera equipment would be my phone. Still, it was a great treat to see this train. A week later, on Sunday, December 8th, I woke up to a text that BNSF 755, one of two fake bonnets on the BNSF roster equipped with a rare RS-3L horn, was leading an empty grain train from Houston headed up to Mitchell, South Dakota. Around noon, following a heads up that it had departed Ark City, I packed up my gear and headed to Wichita. I arrived about 5 or so minutes before the train passed, with plenty of time to set up my equipment. I decided to try a creative shot with my drone by flying it out from behind a tree to reveal the train, and it didn't turn out perfect, but I'll have plenty of chances for this shot in the future, so... 4 days later, on Thursday, December 12th, I got a text from a friend that UP 1943, the Spirit of the Union Pacific, was to be the lead unit on the MWTFW. At around 3 p.m., I headed out to Wichita to catch it and figured they would depart soon as this was their usual departure time. When I arrived, I could see the nose of 1943 poking over the hump. This gave me hope that they would continue south soon. While I was watching 1943 in anticipation, an eastbound BNSF intermodal passed with a pair of SD-70 Aces trailing, one being Ferromex. Of course, the Phoenix Power Desk had to slap the GVO in front of them. Once that train cleared, SKOL came out from the K&O with train 302 to start heading back to Winfield. After these two trains, an hour passed in silence, and by then it was nearly sunset, with golden light continuing to disappear. One of the worst feelings as a rail fan is watching the sun set on a train that you thought would pass in daylight. I then got a text from a friend that a BNSF coal train was passing through Connell, about 5 or so miles away from Wichita, and it was a pleasant surprise to see a pair of SD-70 Aces on the head end. A lot of people find coal trains boring, especially around parts where they're super common, But around here, the only regularly scheduled coal train is the Red Rock train, and it's rumored to not even be around for that much longer, so I really enjoy seeing them. Then, pretty much the worst possible thing happened. I heard the crew of UP 1943 South say something on the radio along the lines of, "We built our train wrong, we need to shove the whole train back into the yard and fix it." So then I had to watch in extreme and utter disappointment as the nose of 1943 completely disappeared from view. After that, the DPUs of the coal train went by. I just about gave up and went home, but I decided to stick around, and finally, at 5:45 p.m., the dispatcher finally gave them their warrant. So I thought, surely they'll be heading south shortly, right? Wrong. They didn't pass my spot for something like 45 minutes, and by then, the sun had fully set. Oh well, you win some, you lose some. I didn't see another train for something like a week and a half after that, but it was well worth the wait because on Monday, December 23rd, I picked up my to-date most expensive piece of rail finning equipment, the Cannon Rebel T7, in anticipation of a special rail finning event occurring later that week. So, naturally, I wanted to test it out to make sure I was prepared for the special event. And I would have a good subject to test with because a friend texted me that KLWX 8520 was going to be trailing on the MWTFW. I opted to set up at 17th Street for them because of what happened the last time I tried to catch something on the MWTFW, but it backfired because a BNSF grain train heading to Adair, Illinois from Eagle Pass, Texas blocked it. That aside, the Grainers' last ship was pretty decent with a Ferromex SD70 Ace and a BNSF SD75M. Seeing BNSF SD75Ms outside of local service on manifests is already hard enough, or on intermodals looking at you, Q, Clo, LPK in June, but I hadn't seen one on a grain train in 4 years. Even though it wasn't leading because SD75s never lead through here, it was still great to see. After that little kerfuffle, I raced to South Junction to catch the WTFW. I was able to make it with about 3 minutes to spare, but since the train was already approaching when I arrived, I didn't have time to fully set up my tripod. At least I've seen 8520 before. The next day, on Christmas Eve, I got a text from the same friend who alerted me to both 1943 and 8520 that now a pair of XCSX Mother Mate slug sets owned by Horizon Rail were going to be on the WTFW. I knew I wouldn't be able to catch them leaving town the next day on Christmas, so I decided to just stick with seeing them stopped in the yard. The ST70M with them was nice because those are becoming rare, and they are my favorite locomotives on the UP roster. 3 days later, the special rail finning event occurred, which was my trip to West Quincy, Missouri to film a matched pair of Santa Fe Warbonnet C44-9Ws on the BNSF Weaver Local LHLA 836. After months of thinking, I finally made up my mind and let my massive love for the Santa Fe run wild and convince me to make the trek. My first train would be in Kansas City, where I got this absolutely beautiful shot of a UP SD70M trailing on some manifest out of 18th Street Yard. I didn't see any other trains until West Quincy, where the chase of the Warbonnet Local begun. I tried to leapfrog the train up to the town of LaGrange to catch them there, but I didn't make it in time and ended up pacing them through town instead. Next, it was off to Keokuk to catch them coming off the Des Moines River Bridge in some decent rain and fog. After catching the local, I spotted two locomotives in the Keokuk Junction Railway Yard, those being a BUGX switcher that I literally cannot find any information on, and a Pioneer Lines GP20. In downtown Keokuk, I found some more power, that being an LTEX GP38-2, KJRY's main power, 3 BNSF Jeeps, one being an H1, and the Warbonnet Local. Then it was off to Fort Madison to catch the Warbonnets 2 more times, going to and coming from Weaver. I was sitting in my vehicle enjoying a snack when I heard rumbling, so I frantically ran out to the Amtrak platform just in time for a San Bernardino to Chicago quality intermodal with a Norfolk Southern unit 4th out. Next, it was showtime. The Weaver Local rounded the K-Line curve into Fort Madison and rolled past the old CB&Q depot. next train would be a BNSF Long Beach, California to Chicago International Stack train bound for the Norfolk Southern. After almost an hour of no activity, the Weaver local returned west for my final shot under the cover of night. The rain actually held off for 5 minutes, during which the train passed. Immediately after the local cleared, the rain started up again as an eastbound BNSF intermodal from Los Angeles to North Baltimore, Ohio via CSX rolled through the station. I was waiting for Amtrak Southwest Chief number 3 to show up since it was in the area. How many people do you think have walked into this thing in the last week? Finally, as the rain picked up and absolutely soaked me, number 3 came into Fort Madison with a pair of P-42 DCs on the point to end the day. There's no way the next day could possibly be better. Boy, was I wrong. The next morning, I woke up and checked the Burlington, Iowa rail cam to see that an SD-70 Mace had led an eastbound coal train through town. Since I had still yet to see one of these lead on camera, I decided to give chase to the town of Kirkwood, Illinois, about 25 miles east of Burlington. I arrived roughly 15 minutes before the train did, as it got slowed down by a hill west of town. Soon enough, I could hear the old Mac and the Thundercab Ace trailing behind it, screaming up the grade into town as they hauled their heavy load of black diamonds to Childs, Kentucky. After that, I headed back to Burlington to explore the Burlington Junction Railway in hopes of finding some leaser locomotives in storage, and I found quite a few locomotives. The first one was BJRY 1501, a former Burlington Northern SW 1500. Next up was DLCX 35, a rare 35-tonner. A bit deeper into the BJRY was the best find of them all, a completely unpatched Chicago and Northwestern GP40. I honestly cannot believe I managed to catch this locomotive. I had no idea it was even on the BJRY. Unfortunately, right when I found out, my drone decided to just randomly lose connection to the remote control, resulting in nearly crashing into both the ground and a telephone line. Luckily, I managed to regain connection and found 3 more locomotives. BJRY 9626, a former PTRA MP 1500D genset, BJRY 1609, a former Louisville and Indiana GP16, and AGPX 3164, a former CEFX and originally UP Snoot Nose SD40 2. On my way down to where BUGX SD9 number 4324 in Northwestern Pacific Colors lives, I got stopped by the DPUs of a southbound K-Line coal train. After leaving town, I decided to stop at Weaver to catch the K-Line coal. It ended up being a load for the power plant at Marston with an SD70 Ace in the lead. Around this time, I received word that KCS 4006, the Veterans Unit, was en route to Kansas City, where I would be later in the day on a UP coal train with a full KCS consist. With this in mind, I decided to not stop at Fort Madison and instead run straight through to Marceline, since I was planning to visit the old ATSF station there. Upon arriving at Marceline, I was trying to take photos of the ATSF Bluebonnet SD40-2 that is on display there, when I heard a distant K5HL alerting me to the arrival of the ZLAC WSP. As it flew around the abandoned yard, I was delighted to see a pair of fake bonnets trailing. After that train passed, I took some more photos of ATSF 5008, and I was about to leave when I heard a distant Nathan P3 alerting me to the arrival of the HKCK NTW. I decided to set up on the other side of the tracks for this one, as the sun had peeked out from behind a cloud and I wanted to get a train with the station as a backdrop. The train's consist was decent, with a pair of H2-9s and the leader having that wonderful P3. After this train cleared, it was off to Kansas City to visit Midwest Loco in Leeds in hopes of finding the final DME SD40-2 and some Susquehanna locomotives. While passing Airline Junction on Interstate 435, I looked to my right and noticed the passing intermodal cars of CPKC train I-180 heading south. When I arrived at Midwest Loco, instead of immediately photographing the locomotives in the facility, I captured I-180 going south with just my phone. To my surprise, the leader is a KCS SD70 Ace, something decently difficult to see on the Pittsburgh sub ever since the CPKC merger. Once I-180 cleared, I took some quick photos of NYSW SD60s, GMTX 9000, and the final DME SD40-2 before the search for the CNRWX with KCS 4006 would begin. I would start the hunt at the UP 18th Street Yard launch pad, where I found several coal trains, but none of them were the one I was looking for. So I hopped on Kansas Highway 32 and started to trek west. I came across a green signal for an eastbound just outside of 18th Street, which would be for a, if I remember correctly, Harrington to Kansas City train with a sweet duo up front, including an SD70M trailing, again, my favorite locomotive type on the UP roster. Just behind that train was another signal for an eastbound, this one flashing yellow. I continued west until just west of Bonner Springs when I spotted what looked to be a headlight and pulled off to see if I was correct. I was, and an eastbound was stopped just to the west of the crossing I was at. I then used my zoom lens to see if the leader was a KCS SD70 Ace, and sure enough, it was. I then waited in anticipation that they would leave before all daylight was gone, and luckily they did, departing from their stop before I even had time to set up my tripods. The shot of that KCS Ace coming away from a sunset is one of my favorite shots of all time. Not too long after, I spotted the rear DPU, which I could clearly see was indeed 4006. Getting to catch the locomotive I've waited for years to see was an incredible experience. I then continued on home, getting off the interstate at Emporia for some food. While en route to the restaurant, I got stopped by this trackmobile moving some hoppers in the Bunge Spur. After finishing my food, I made a quick run down to the BNSF tracks to see if anything was lined, and sure enough, 2 eastbounds were lined. The first to arrive was the HCDT Gal, running on flashing yellow as opposed to the green on the other track. To my surprise and horror, the CDT Gal would block the ZPHX WSP, robbing me of a race. Guess you can't win 'em all. On New Year's Eve, I got word of an executive SD70 Mac that was a face-out DPO and an empty Red Rock coal train heading my way. These Red Rock trains are already uncommon enough, but with peak season ending and the SD70 Macs returning to storage, I couldn't pass this one up. I decided to go for a little change of scenery and catch the train at Valley Center instead of Wichita, and only had about a 20-minute wait before the epic 2x2 solid EMD consist roared through town. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more videos like this. See you all in the next one.